Like I said, my name is Andrea. I'm with Juris Education. We're super excited to have you here tonight. Tonight's topic of discussion is profile building, how to plan for law school acceptance. Before we get going into tonight's presentation, just a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded. What that means is you will receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. We're looking at running it between 45 minutes and an hour. The majority of tonight's discussion will be going over a few of these points. So creating a law school admissions timeline, ensuring a strong LSAT score, building a competitive resume, and securing strong letters of recommendation. The other majority of tonight's conversation will be that Q&A. So we'll have a couple of touch points throughout the presentation where you're able to actually ask questions to Tamar or Jesse, who will introduce themselves momentarily, whether that be about law school acceptance, whether that be about the LSAT or resumes or just anything about the process. This is very much your time to speak with two extremely intelligent, accomplished counselors, amongst other things, of course. So before we get going, I just want to take a quick moment to introduce who we are, because we recognize that not everyone knows who Juris is and what Juris Education does. So we're a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm, offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students get into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T14 acceptance was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. Now, we believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible, which is why we offer pre-law advising and profile development. This focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences. We also help students boost their academic transcripts and GPA, find stellar internships, and create a timeline for LSAT prep. We have one goal, and that's to get applicants into their dream law program. Our private LSAT tutoring assesses each student's strengths and weaknesses. This helps then create a study plan structure for the days, weeks, and months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. Now, on average, we see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring, and we do offer a 165 plus LSAT score guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we support in creating the perfect application. This guides the creation of a well-balanced list of target, safety, and reach schools. We also help build strong resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. Our goal is to build a perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest. We're excited to assist you with the process, and we're looking forward to your one-on-ones and your consultations and really going forward with tonight's webinar. With that being said, I'd love to pass it over to your panelists for tonight to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse. I am an admissions counselor for Juris. I graduated from law school at USC Gould School of Law in Los Angeles, where I earned my JD MBA. And since then, I've become a practicing attorney in New York. I am in the field of medical malpractice and specialize in litigation. And personally, I've been through, when I went through the process, it was like as I usually tell this story before we start webinars, it was a chaotic time for me. I didn't know that I wanted to go to law school until like the last minute, until my senior year of college. And so there were a lot of mistakes that I made throughout that time, including, the time it took to process my transcript and submitting things at the last minute. And, luckily I was able to get into the school of my choice at the last second, but, there are certainly things I would have done differently if I had the opportunity to do it again. And so Juris is a great way for me to kind of give back and explain to my clients how to sort of navigate the obstacles throughout this process and avoid the mistakes that I made back then. So I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys today.
Hi all, my name's Tamar. I use she, her pronouns. I went to Vanderbilt for my undergrad and majored in English and gender studies. And then after that did a Fulbright fellowship in Taiwan and then came back and did AmeriCorps. and then went to the University of Michigan for law school. So I've kind of always had a public interest bent to what I've been doing. Since I graduated, I was a Skadden Fellow. My primary focus is on child welfare, specifically LGBTQ youth. But right now I'm a law school professor at American University in Washington, D.C., where I focus on litigation for protection order cases for victims of domestic violence and name and gender marker changes for trans and non-binary folks. So I'm excited to be here with you all today. I think Jesse and I have both been working with candidates for a number of years now, and we love putting these webinars on and love talking to folks and making sure that you all have all the resources you need.
All right, so let's start with creating a law school admissions timeline. As I said just now, when I went through this process, it was a very last minute thing for me. I didn't know I wanted to apply. I took the LSAT the summer before my senior year of college, did terribly the first time and then took it again, literally in December, and then got a substantially higher score by the skin of my teeth somehow, miraculously, and then applied in January, which was horrible. You always want to start earlier. And so what we do here at Juris is we provide a well-structured timeline, giving yourself at least 18 months, that's ideally what the amount of time it would take to prepare and to get things in order and to get the ball rolling. And allocate that time to a lot of different factors. That includes studying for the LSAT, which will take months. Don't think that you can cram for that test. Researching schools, looking at, what types of programs you want to sort of specialize in if you are interested in a particular area of law, or if maybe you have a specific background in, like, say, STEM or something like that, then maybe you want to practice in like patent law or something of that nature that would be more applicable. And gathering materials like shooting emails to your professors who will write your recommendation letters or employers, getting through all of these, basically the paperwork of the application, such that you'll be in a better place in, a few months out to really start with that personal statement and getting the bulk of your resume and your personal statement done as well. So early preparation strengthens your application and allows for time to kind of adjust for unexpected events that may occur. And you never know when that'll happen.
So kind of based off of what Jesse was saying, do not underestimate how long this process can take. I've seen candidates do this process over a number of years. I have also seen some candidates do it kind of on a really crunch timeline that adds a lot of stress and anxiety that I don't generally recommend. You want to make sure that you're giving each piece adequate time, right? So like LSAT preparation, for some people, they can take it once and be done. I don't know if I've had any candidates in the past couple of years who don't try for at least a second higher score at this point. And so you want to make sure, like, plan for best case scenario, but also plan for worst case scenario. You want to make sure that you've like built in enough time to take the test again if you might need to. And then if you don't, great, you have extra time on your hands, right? You also want to make sure that you give your recommenders enough time. I can't tell you how often recommenders like put letters of recommendation on the back burner and don't get to them when they need to get to them. And so you have to do a lot of kind of massaging and follow up of like, I'm waiting on your letter of recommendation. When can I expect that? Sometimes they'll ask for like all of your materials. Sometimes they'll ask for you to write a letter of recommendation for yourself so they can see what that looks like. Sometimes they ask for kind of like all these additional materials. And some of them don't, right? Some of them say like, great, I already have one that I've written for you in the past or that I can use that's similar to yours. Like, I'll submit it tomorrow. But again, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time in case they don't say that, and you don't want to be kind of like running up against the clock. And then I think all of these other components, personal statement, resume, supplemental statements, all of those things, they take different amounts of time for different people. I think I shared this on my last webinar. I had an outstanding candidate earlier this year who I think I worked with him end to end for 3 weeks, and he applied to 15 schools, and we slammed through all of those essays and his resume That is super uncommon. I think he was essentially working around the clock and was doing nothing else but essay writing, and he was an excellent writer to start with. I will say most people really struggle with personal statement writing because it's really awkward to talk about yourself. We are not trained to do that sort of writing. It doesn't feel comfy. It feels weird. You don't know if you're telling the right story. You don't know how to say, like it's too long, it's too short, like all of these things. Make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. This is a process that can take many, many, many months. And it's better to plan for it to be longer and be pleasantly surprised when it's not, versus thinking it's only going to take you a short amount of time and then beating your head against a wall because you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to be done with this weeks ago. Why is this still so difficult? I'm only on draft 2. That's not a super fun place to be. I have been there before. I do not recommend it.
All right, so this slide basically is just like a general guideline, and obviously we'll send this to you guys after the webinar, but ideally you want to start March or April before the application season begins. That's going to be giving you enough time to start studying for the LSAT. Usually people take the LSAT, in June through August, sometimes in October and sometimes December, but not as common. And it's around September, the time that you usually begin to, get your paperwork in order, finishing that resume, getting those personal statements, first drafts done, getting those recommendation letters submitted, things like that. November, December, that's like when early decision deadlines roll in. You want to get things in. And then January through April, sort of like the waiting game where you're kind of hearing back from schools and seeing if you're waitlisted and seeing if they might want to interview you. That's sort of that time where things are kind of towards the end of the cycle. So, but this is just a rough timeline. Some people start earlier. As I explained before, I started really late in the game and that wasn't fun, but it was doable. And so if you're still thinking about it and you're kind of late in the game, don't completely lose hope. I just hope that you are upfront with us when you consult with us. I highly suggest speaking to one of the Juris advisors here and signing up for a free consultation to kind of explain your situation, and we'll go from there and we'll work with what we have. Nothing is ever going to be 100% perfect. So no matter what your circumstances are, we'll work with you to get you through what you need to get through.
So earning a strong LSAT score, I say this to most of my candidates. I wish the LSAT did not matter as much as it does. I think standardized testing is annoying. I don't like it very much. I think actually, when I was at Michigan, this is like a little pathetic to say and maybe tells you how a little bit about the legal profession, but I was taught by the first female professor who ever taught at Michigan. And she was older in defense of the school, but she said that she had been on a consultation for designing the LSAT way back in the day, which tells you how old she was. And they had changed the LSAT when they discovered that women historically had been scoring higher on the LSAT than men. And so I will tell you, the LSAT, standardized testing is garbage for a lot of reasons. And also it matters a lot in applications. As much as schools want to say, we review things holistically, I think some schools are more holistic than others. I think none of them care not at all about your LSAT. It's not a thing in our field. The higher LSAT score, the more scholarship money you're going to get. The higher LSAT score, the more doors will be open to you. So I would make sure that you take your studying super seriously. I would say this is probably the piece that is most important in your application. Make sure you have a study plan that works for you. Make sure you are investing in the materials that work for you. If that's group study, great. If that's individual study, great. If that's online studying, great. If that's what study methods work best for you at this point in your careers. But you should make sure that you have a study plan, you're sticking to the study plan, you're adjusting the study plan if it's not working, right? And making sure that you are doing the proper prep and giving it its due. The LSAT is not, it's a learnable test. It just depends on how much time you give yourself to learn it. I think I've said before, Jesse, in some of my other presentations, I had a friend who was dead set on getting a 180. She spent 2 years learning the test and she got her 180 and got into every T14 school she wanted to. I would not dedicate 2 years to studying for the LSAT. That time is precious to me, but it was what she wanted to do and it's totally learnable and she did it. So those are all things you all have to decide what time you have, what money you have to invest in it, but don't underestimate the importance of it. Even when I can roll my eyes and say it's garbage, and also it's garbage we all have to deal with.
Exactly. So one of the ways to maximize your chances of doing well on the test is I think a lot of people deal with test anxiety. Like I know a lot of really intelligent people who will, spit out all the facts, know literally everything, all the tricks of the trade, and then they'll freeze on the spot because I guess the adrenaline gets to them or something like that. And so one of the best ways I think to counteract this is to literally practice, and this is the same thing for the bar exam too, it was what recommended to us, is practice under real conditions. Put yourself in a room that would look similar to, a test center with no distractions, or with some distractions, honestly, if you're not sure if it's going to be loud or not. Do it the same day of the week that the actual test will be on. Say if it's going to be on Saturday, do the Saturday before, or whatever Saturday works for you before the test, and set aside that amount of time and just go plug straight through it. And make sure you have done that a couple times before you actually sit down for the real one, because once you do, it'll become like muscle memory, and you'll just know everything and how it'll feel. Other tricks of the trade, I think I read somewhere, don't quote me on this, but I think, having some type of cologne or perfume that triggers your memory with regard, if there's like a particular concept that you can't, for the life of you remember to use, or like a strategy or something, wearing a certain perfume while you're doing the practice set and then wearing it again, cologne or perfume on the day of the test, that'll help also make you more comfortable because it's like, oh, it's a familiar feeling. It's things that make things feel familiar. Wear the same clothes that you wear during the practice test doing the actual thing. Those things help psychologically. And then refine timing techniques. Develop strategies to allocate time per question. In short, one thing I did personally, it doesn't work for everyone, is that I just knew, my tutor once told me that, the test is structured in a way to to make sure that you don't develop a rhythm or develop a momentum, so to speak, because that's why it's like, it starts typically from like, actually, I don't even know if it starts from the easiest to hardest. I think they structure it in a way, all I know is that they structure it in a way so that it's not like you're going to be able to get through all of them. And so what I did personally, and I'm not saying it's going to be good for everyone, is what I would literally start from the middle of the test, work my way to the back, and then start from the beginning, and then work my way to the middle. I did that for the bar exam too, and it helped. I don't know if it was, what's it called when it was a placebo effect or something, but I thought that was helpful because I felt like I didn't want to read it in order that the test makers gave it to me. ETS, which is the test maker, loves to play games with you, and so you just gotta not play their game and do things your way. And if that means doing it in out of order, then maybe that's the way to go. But that's, timing, making sure that you finish each section on time, and coming up with creative ways to make sure that you have enough time in the end is really the name of the game.
So you'll also want to make sure you've built a competitive resume and that you're highlighting how competitive you are in your resume, right? I often see candidates like selling themselves short, not adequately explaining the items on their resume, or kind of doing formatting things that are a little bit funky. I will say, we as lawyers don't really like funky things. Like, I would not try and do a funky looking resume. Like, you want a traditional font and a traditional looking resume. You don't want the admissions reader to look at it and be like, oh, this looks a little weird. You want them to look at it and be like, I know what I'm looking at, and it's very clear what it is. Some of the ways to make sure that you're doing that are making sure that you're like really highlighting experiences where you were in leadership roles, whether that means like putting like in a line what those roles were, right? Or some people put honors and awards on the top of their resume in some sort of way, like under their education. That might be something, depending on what your individual resume looks like, that could work. If you come from kind of a field where things were really project-based, I've sometimes seen people do resumes that are like based on those projects instead of necessarily based on individual roles they had. That's not a good fit for everyone. That was not a fit for me, that I had not had project-based roles, but that might be something for you if you have, right? You want to mention like meaningful volunteer work. If you have had consistent volunteer work, anything like that, consistent dedication to certain causes, like those are all things to highlight. You also want to make sure that whatever you put on your resume is in line with things that your recommenders are saying, right? So if you're saying like, I worked for this organization for 3 years, and then your recommender, who's your supervisor there, is like, Joe worked here for 1.5 years. Not good. Don't let that happen. So make sure that everything is kind of in line, whether that's like your resume and rec letters, your resume and what you say in your personal statement. If you're talking about something in your personal statement, you want to make sure that all the timelines kind of line up really nicely. I think that's all I have on resumes. I would try to aim for a 1-page resume. If you've been out of school for a little while, 2-page resumes are okay. I never think anything more than 2 pages is acceptable for law school applications. Make sure that you have crossed your T's and dotted your I's. There should be no straggling periods. All fonts should be exactly right. All spacing should be exactly correct. Margins should be exactly the same. Like all of those things are things that lawyers are typically type A people. We don't look fondly on those types of errors. And the admissions officer will likely not see that as a positive thing if those errors are on your resume.
Yes.
Amazing. So I'm going to do a quick check-in with everyone. I know we have a ton of questions in the chat. Maybe we can go through a question or two, and I want to just make sure that we're also mindful of time and continuing on with the presentation. But just want to take a quick moment to say that we do offer free consultations. They're with some really terrific people. There's a QR code on screen. Take your phones out, quickly scan that. You'll be led to a page where you'll be able to book some one-on-one time with an admissions counselor to go over your specific questions about the law school admissions process. And if you were interested in any sort of our programs, we do offer a 10% off for all of you folks who are live on this call or those at home as well. So we have 10 off web is the code to use. But in terms of questions, there's some really awesome, I requested for a consultation. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay. Thanks everyone. Love hearing that. So there's a question in here that I think is really interesting. There's an individual in here who's sharing their own experiences, but I wanted to open up the question a little bit more. So it's a little bit applicable to everyone. So how do law schools view applicants with a lower undergraduate GPA, but they have strong graduate school performance and of course have work experience as well? I'll open that up to both of you.
Sure. So from my understanding, obviously undergrad GPA is going to be for the average law school applicants, that's going to be the most important GPA. I will say that if you did phenomenally well in grad school and you're far removed from undergrad, and the more far removed the better, then the less the undergrad GPA will matter. However, I will say that the undergrad GPA still bears a great deal of weight. And similarly, when you are in the workforce and you're a lawyer and you're looking for jobs, even if you're 5 or 6 years out, they'll still ask for a transcript. Same logic applies. The more removed you are, the more experience you have, the less it matters, but it's still going to be there. But I will say that, there's nothing you can do about your undergrad GPA if you're out of school, and just focus on, it sounds like you're doing a great job with regard to grad school, with regard to work, and those things will shine through in your application, and Juris will help you get to where it needs to be. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I'm similar. The further out you are, the less it matters. It will never not matter, but I think especially if you generally want to see an upward trend in undergrad, right? Like you want to see people were putzing around, freshman year, maybe couldn't figure out work-life balance, that sort of thing. You don't really want to see super tanking GPAs later in undergrad. And if that's you, then I think you probably are looking at writing an addendum as an explanation. Hopefully there is a helpful explanation. But if you've taken significant time off, I think that really bolsters. And I think if your graduate GPA is strong, that is also, I think that can be a part of the narrative of I was still figuring my stuff out as an undergrad, and I've really mastered my study skills. And hopefully you also have a strong LSAT, and the combination of those things I think can be really strong. It depends on how low of a GPA we're talking about. It depends on how high of a GPA we're talking about now. It depends on how long you've been out. So the lawyerly answer we're giving you is it depends. But it could be totally fine. And there might be a great way to kind of explain it in your application.
And where in the application would they explain this?
So it depends. I think if there's, again, like something serious that happened, like I had a student who had like multiple family members pass away one semester and had a really terrible GPA that semester because of it. And it was like senior year of college. That's an addendum. That is an appropriate place to write it. Some schools actually, I'm seeing this more and more, have like a box, like a place where it's not an addendum, but they like ask you to explain if something happened in your undergrad career that you need to explain, or differences in GPAs or anything like that. So you don't even have to write an addendum. You essentially just like copy and paste. That can be an appropriate place. If the answer is like, my GPA was just kind of low and I partied freshman year and now it's better because I'm in grad school and I'm more mature, like that doesn't always necessarily need an addendum. I think that is kind of what the expected narrative is. And so that might not necessitate an additional explanation from your part. So I will do once again, it depends, but it might be an addendum worthy answer.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think there's some amazing conversations happening within the chat, which is fantastic to see. But I think we can go back to those questions and just allow you two to get through the presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. So let's talk about recommendation letters, right? So it's important to choose the right ones. And from experience, it's always going to be quality over of the recommendation letter and the detail of the recommendation letter over whatever score or grade you got in the class. And here's what I mean by that. So say, for example, you had an A+ in your freshman or sophomore year or whatever year, and you got like the highest score in the class. That's great. But say, for example, you never went to the professor during office hours, you never spoke with the professor, you never went to class, and it was like a seminar with like 300 people. What is that professor, if you say, okay, I'm going to ask this professor for a letter because I got an A+ in that class, what is that person going to say about you? They're going to say, this person did really well in my class. And then that'll literally be the end of the letter because there's nothing else that they can attest to. They don't know you personally and they don't know your character or anything like that. Now let's talk about option B. Say, for example, you took a class, it was like a seminar of like 8 people and it was really rigorous. You went to office hours every day. You went and spoke with them after every test, every assignment, and you really buckled down and you struggled, but you got like a B or even a B-, say, for example. Which class do you think, which professor, just assuming for the second one, your professor really liked you and saw your grit and saw you fight for that B, which one do you think is going to be better? The answer is, by and large, going to usually be the second recommender, the one that knows you best, the one that knows your character, knows that you are hardworking, diligent, and can speak to your ability to persist in the face of adversity. That recommender is going to be the one that I think will always trump the one that can't really say anything about you because they don't know who you are, even if you got an A in that class. So there are times where I've spoken to students who will always go for the professor or the recommender or even, someone that they know who has like a huge, lofty and amazing title to write them a recommendation letter, right? And I have to say, unless that person knows you personally, unless that person can speak to your skills, can speak to your character, and can speak credibly about your accomplishments, then that recommender really can't say much about you and won't say much about you, because if they do, then they're lying. They're not saying anything truthful about you, and they're not going to do that for you. So when you think about the recommenders you think are going to be the best ones, think about the ones you've really established a good personal relationship with, ones that you've spoken more than a handful of times with. And this is an ongoing discussion that I have with clients all the time about who's the best one earlier on in the cycle, that is. And so when you speak with us at Juris, we'll definitely walk you through that process and really discuss and distill down which ones are going to be like the top 2 or 3 that you would want to reach out to get that recommendation letter for, because this is like a crucial part of your application. And so After you figure out who the recommenders are, let's talk about the process of getting that letter and giving them the instructions. So oftentimes people will reach out to the recommender and they'll say, yeah, sure, I'll write a recommendation letter for you. And then, as Tamar had mentioned, sometimes they'll forget, or sometimes they'll not know what to write, and they'll leave it at the last second, and it'll be a very vague and boring letter. What you want to do is preempt that. Assuming this person knows who you are and can speak to your character, usually what you do is provide them with a guideline or a blueprint of what you would like them to discuss about your character, about your accomplishments. Talk about some of the key accomplishments you've had in their class, or if they're a supervisor or your boss, what you did on the job that made the company or the business or organization stronger. And also share your resume, share your personal statement, help them help you craft a letter, because help giving them a bullet pointed list of, or a skeletal outline even of a letter will help so much. And it'll be giving them basically a blueprint of painting you in the best light, and all those things will just be things that will refresh the recollection of who you are. And so these are the biggest things, and Juris is really important in terms of distilling down, first of all, who's going to be the right recommender, and then how are you going to approach that recommender. So those are the 2 steps.
So I think Jesse covered, honestly, a ton of this, and really excellent advice. I second everything that he just said. You do want to be really strategic about who you choose. Hopefully you all have many people that you can ask for letters of recommendation, but even if you don't, you want to be strategic, right? And you want to make sure that they are people that can write really strong recommendation letters and can say things about you. It does not matter if they have a big title. I cannot emphasize that enough. It just does not matter. Admissions officers do not care what degrees they have or what, positions they have. They care about this person knowing who you are and being able to talk about how the traits that you have will translate well to law school. And sometimes sometimes recommenders haven't written letters of recommendation before, right? And that's okay. But sometimes it can be helpful to send them examples, right? Like there's lots of good examples online. I think Juris Education actually has some good advice on how to structure a recommendation letter. That can be something that's really helpful to send to them. Sometimes if you have a couple of recommenders that you're nervous might all say similar things, you can guide them and say, I would really like for you to highlight this specific thing that you saw in me or this specific instance in class. Honestly, as someone who now writes students a ton of recommendation letters, I love when students say that to me, because I'm like, thank God I don't have to come up with something from scratch, right? You have given me the direction and now I can do this a lot faster. So make sure that you are kind of unafraid of doing that. I know this is not possible for everyone, but schools obviously all have kind of different personas. And so if you have, 5 or 6 recommenders who are writing you letters of recommendation, if there is a way to kind of play what recommenders go with what schools based on what they're highlighting, that can be great. It's not possible for everyone. It's okay if it's not possible for you, but there are some schools that care about certain traits or characteristics more, right? And so if you have one recommender that's really focusing on that one thing and it's a really good trait for that one school, make sure you plug them in for that school, right? And it's okay to kind of have them only doing recommendation letters for certain schools and not for all of them, because they all have kind of different things that they're looking for. And you can still be strategic about what gets plugged in where.
Amazing. Okay, great. So now let's move on to elevating your application materials. So when I think about a personal statement, which is probably the most important of the subjective elements of your application part, besides the numbers, GPA and LSAT, whatever, that's very important, probably the most important. But this of the subjective papers that you're going to write, the personal statement's sort of the biggest part of it. And so you really want to put a lot of time and attention into it, because this is your stamp. This is who you are. It's basically a brief 1 or 2 pager explanation about who you are, what you want to do, and where you come from, and where to go from here. And one of the biggest things I tell my clients usually is that it's important to come up with a theme. And if you have no idea what you want to write about, let's take a step back and look at your resume, look at your transcript, look at whatever journal entries, essays you've written before, like spread them out on a table in front of you and think from a third party perspective, what would this person, based on taking yourself out of the equation, what does this person seem to be interested in? What do you think would be cool to write about based on what they've accomplished and based on, what they may aspire to do with their educational background? And then go from there. That could be the starting point of what you want your overarching theme to be if you have nowhere to start from. Oftentimes, your personal statement can, start from anywhere from your childhood to even high school to undergrad, just as a starting point, as a explanation of where you come from and what you want to do. This ideally should discuss, a deep dive into one personal experience, ideally in undergrad or postgrad, where you really experience something significant that led you to aspire to do something more with a legal degree. And towards the end of the personal statement, I like to advise my clients to point to or suggest at some type of future aspiration that you would use your legal degree to do. So for example, I personally spoke about how I came from a Chinese American background. My parents came here on a student visa, and my dad went to Temple University in Pennsylvania for his PhD. And, but at the time I already had a sister, right? And so but for their ability to come to America and have a new future, I literally would not exist because of the one-child policy that was in place at the time. And so I'm literally a product of the fact that they could pursue the American dream here. And so what I wrote my essay was about that. It was about the fact that I majored in Chinese and business in undergrad. And then tying all those things together, my narrative was that I wanted to become an immigration attorney to sort of assist other people into coming to the US to pursue their dreams and to create better futures for themselves and their families, just as my parents did for me. And for a period of time after graduation, I did practice immigration law for about 2 years. And so that was something that kind of tied together my past, my present at that time, and then pointed to something of the future. And that's a formula that I like to kind of suggest for people who have nowhere to start and don't know what they want to talk about. But I think that's sort of like an explanation of an example of how the personal statement is sort of like a stamp of who you are. This is who I am, and this is like being given to an admissions committee that has no idea who you are. And it's basically your shot at presenting them, your entire history in an essay format. Your resume is going to sort of be the antithesis of your personal statement in a certain way. And why I say that is that personal statement is going to be like a deeper dive into a particular experience. It's going to be a deeper dive into, a particular instance or particular situation that you were in that kind of help define and motivate you. The resume, on the other hand, is more like a list of things. It's basically a bird's eye view of everything that you've accomplished, all your professional and relevant achievements wrapped into a one-pager. And so sometimes people will get confused and they'll try to make their personal statement like a resume and kind of enumerate everything that they've accomplished. That's really not the purpose of the personal statement. The personal statement is personal. It's supposed to be your stamp of approval, basically, of who you are, where the resume is a bird's eye view of everything that you've accomplished. So don't conflate the two of those things. That's the worst thing you can ever do. And at Juris, we explain, precisely how to approach each of these two elements, because they're really the crux of your application when it comes down to it. It's your resume and your personal statement. Supplemental essays are also incredibly important. Whenever something is optional, I typically advise that means mandatory, because why would you not write a supplemental essay when you have the opportunity to do so? You want to show your due diligence. Of course, there's certain situations where you don't write the supplemental essay. For example, if there's something that's wholly inapplicable to who you are, what you've accomplished, then maybe we can discuss that one-on-one. But typically, I would say, usually this is an opportunity for you to discuss challenges, to bring up, your diverse perspective, how you would add to the classroom, things like that. And then, as Tamar mentioned before, make sure everything is consistent across all materials so that there's no loopholes or things that don't make sense. So those are your application materials in a nutshell.
We're gonna pick up the pace a little bit just because I see how many questions there are in the chat, and I want to make sure that we can get to some of them. So strengthening your profile. This is kind of something that Jesse and I have been talking about throughout. Every piece of your profile needs to be as strong as it possibly can. That means get eyes on them, get other people to give you their opinions, right? Make sure that you're really checking everything, crossing your T's, dotting your I's. Leverage any unique experiences you've had. That can be highlighting it in a resume. That can be highlighting it in your essays. That can be academic. That can be professional. That can be personal, right? Writing essays, one of my favorite things about them is that you can really highlight something that wouldn't be on a resume, right? And then showcase growth and resilience. You can do that through your essays. You can do that through, I guess in certain ways you can do it on resumes. I guess primarily this is going to be through either a personal statement, or some schools have really interesting supplemental essay topics. And I feel like they're getting more and more interesting every year. So those are kind of the places that you want to make sure that you're showing your uniqueness and making sure that that's coming off the page.
All right, so let's talk about making a standout profile. I think this is kind of a rehash of what Tamar just said, but identify and focus on your experiences, make sure they align with the core values of the law school. So a lot of, every time the law school is going to have a mission statement, or sort of like a thing on their website that explains what they stand for and what they want their students to embody. I think that's a good starting place for kind of tying back what you want to exemplify, especially in the supplemental essay, especially in those essays where it's like, why this particular school. Make sure you do that, because you don't want it to sound like a generic essay that you could just submit anywhere. You want it to be particularized for the supplemental essays, that is. Continuously seek feedback, get feedback from people who know you personally, who know you well, who know, what you stand for and what you want to do with your life. And if they think that if you get their stamp of approval, then you're on the right track. Don't ask just everyone, because if you ask too many people, they might give differing opinions and then it gets confusing. So just focus on like 2 or 3 of your closest peers, your family members, and see what they think, and go from there. And then stay proactive, networking with alumni, mentors, admissions reps. Try to schedule a tour for the campus. Get people's emails in terms of when you go to campus and you meet with admissions ambassadors. Email them a thank you note. Be proactive, stay connected. And these are things that you want to do, because these are also abilities and skills you'll need in the real world too, after you graduate and need to find a job. Being able to talk to people and network is always going to be an important factor for that.
Okay, so showcasing your unique value. There are kind of lots of different ways and places to do this. You want to make sure that you're identifying key traits that reflect what your values are, and hopefully those values align with the values of your target schools, right? You want to highlight how your skills and experiences will contribute to the law school classroom and to the diversity of the class, right? Schools are really interested in like getting diverse perspectives and thoughts, because that makes the classroom better. You want to highlight how you will contribute to that. You want to illustrate what your commitment is to legal studies. I will say this does not mean that you need to have been in like a pre-law society and have been a poli-sci major in college and have only done like legal work in the summer, right? Like I had none of that on my resume. I did not want to be a lawyer until essentially the like month before I decided to start studying for the LSAT. That's okay. But you do want to, at the very least, have a narrative about like, okay, if there's nothing on your resume that demonstrates your interest in law, like why are you interested in law right now? And you should have a good answer to that question. Create a narrative that ties your past accomplishments to your future aspirations. Again, that can be legal, that can be non-legal, right? You might have lots of personal experiences that have led you to realize the importance of the law, or how the law can be helpful to others, or how you wish the law had been helpful to you and your family, or something like that. Those are all things to highlight. Use examples that demonstrate leadership, analytical thinking, and passion. Those are things that law schools love to see. And then position yourself as a candidate who will excel academically and professionally. Ultimately, law schools see themselves as professional schools much more than undergrad institutions do. And so they care about what kind of professional you will be, and also partially because they probably want your money when you graduate. So you want to show that you will be successful, and that they don't have to worry about that later.
Yes. And showcase your commitment too. Highlight your long-term activities. People ask, can I do or talk about things that I've done that trace, years back, maybe even in high school. I would say the rule of thumb is as long as it is a consistent thing that is a significant part of who you are and what you want to do, and it spans throughout your undergrad and postgrad experience, that would be something that you want to talk about. I think that would be worth sharing. Share impactful experiences where you made a tangible difference. This can be manifested in both your personal statement in terms of speaking to that specific experience, and also in your resume in a way, because you can talk about that in the bullet points and also enumerate and quantify how you made a tangible difference. Did you, increase your audience by 10%? Did you increase customer satisfaction by 5%? Things like that. You led a team of 10 people. You, coordinated between multiple stakeholders. Things like that. Emphasize your passion for justice and advocacy through personal stories. Everyone's gone through some type of adversity, and it's important in this profession to be able to give back, because it's not just about, maximizing stakeholder value and stuff like that. You also want to be able to showcase the fact that you are a human being at the end of the day, and that you are interested in the greater good for the general public as well. And those are things that you can highlight and demonstrate also, if you're still an undergrad or if you're looking for volunteer work. I think those are things that you can consider doing, and also jotting down as well. And then reflect on how your background uniquely prepares you for a career in law, whether that's, as I explained before, about my personal background and my family's background and how that kind of inspired me to pursue immigration law for a period of time. Or perhaps you have a STEM background and you want to pursue a career in patent law or something like that, that would be able to leverage that kind of science or mathematical background. Being able to point to how you want to kind of shape your future, given your past and your experience, is going to be an important way for you to demonstrate that you are committed to succeeding in this profession and doing well for yourself and also for others.
Okay, so the finishing touches, this will surprise almost no one. Make sure you proofread. Make sure you proofread a lot. Make sure you proofread more than once. Make sure you proofread out loud. Make sure you send it to others and make sure they proofread. This is so incredibly important. This is a little bit hard to say the further into the process we get. Submit early if it's possible. If it's not possible, that's okay, right? Like, that does not mean that you won't get into any law schools. But one of my other least favorite thing about law school admissions is that it's rolling. And that means that if the earlier you submit, the more spots there are for an admissions officer to offer you. So as early as you can, as long as it's quality, get your applications in.
All right, securing your spot. So once you get everything in, there's going to be a lot of strategy involved with, making sure that you stand out. One way that this may occur is if you're invited to interview. Sometimes it can be an individual interview. Sometimes it could be a group interview. So if you are invited for an interview, make sure that you're prepared. Practice articulating your narrative. Practice your elevator pitch, running down, who you are, where you come from, what you've done, what your major was, etc. And then being able to answer common law school interview questions. And we have a ton of these resources as well. Once you consult with us, we can provide you with those materials as well. Follow up strategically, like I mentioned before, send personalized thank you notes. When you go visit campus, get their email, get their card, send them within 24 hours a personalized email saying how much you appreciated their time and what you learned from whatever tour that you took part in. And also stay professional, maintain your consistent communication, make sure that you are, saying, dear Mr., Mrs., whatever, and, not using emojis or whatever in your emails. Just make sure that you are professional. And, that low-key also goes for your social media as well. Just make sure that things are clean over there as well, because people can and do make sure that people are who they say they are, and you don't want that to come across differently if because we are in a very, very digital age right now. So just make sure that everything's clean, and just keep at it, keep demonstrating your interest, and being able to communicate and stay in touch with people is an important skill no matter what you do. So it's good practice regardless.
And I am back. Before we get into the rest of our questions, I'd love to ask everyone a favor on this call. We want to hear from you. So you've sat through almost an hour of us chatting away at you. So we want to hear from you now. So if you could take out your phones, I know everyone has their phone near them, scan this QR code and just give us a piece of feedback. There's about 4 or 5 questions. We want to hear about your experiences. That could be, something you really liked about this presentation, or if you have an idea for future presentations. We absolutely love this feedback. I can tell you right now, we're planning Q1 webinars for 2025. I cannot believe I'm saying that. So we want to make sure that we're bringing to the table what you want to see. So please, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. In the meantime, let's get going with some of these questions. We're going to try and get through as many as possible in 7 minutes. So Jacqueline asks, what if we've had a lot of school involvement, work experience, and volunteer experience? How do we pick what to omit and how long to make explanations of what we chose to keep? I believe this is in regards to the resume. So I think I'd love to open up that question a little bit. How do you know what to put on your resume when you have a ton of experience, keeping in mind the length of the resume? How do you pick what to keep and what to put on there?
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I took almost anything out of my resume. I think you want to be very strategic about the descriptions you give. And I think what I ultimately decided, I had a lot of involvement, and I ultimately actually decided that some of the items didn't need a bullet point underneath them. They were self-explanatory enough. And so I actually had a volunteer section at the bottom where I listed the organization and my position and the time that I had, and didn't provide an explanation. And so that can be an option if you're kind of in a bind and a bunch of the stuff is, some of the stuff is self-explanatory. If you're like working in an elementary school as a volunteer, like there's only so many things you can do as an elementary school volunteer. And so sometimes like don't overdo it on the bullet points. You want to be really strategic about what explanations you're providing. And I think one thing I'll say is like, if you've done one volunteer activity with one organization one time, those sorts of things need to drop off, right? Like those are the first things that go, unless it was like the most meaningful, life-changing volunteer day of your life. Like admissions officer, that does not show like consistent dedication to a cause, right? It's just like a one-off and it doesn't need to be on there. Mm-hmm. I would say other things that can fall off are like, if there are honors and awards that are on your transcript, or like great GPA stuff that's on your transcript, like you don't need to double down and put it on your resume. Save the space. I would say you can play with font and margins, but obviously not to the extreme. It still needs to be readable. I think those are my general basic suggestions on where to start on the cutting process.
Awesome.
Jesse, do you have anything else?
No, I think you covered literally everything.
So is it crucial to indicate the number of hours for each position?
No, this is only something I would do for schools that ask for it. Like UCLA notoriously asks for it. There's a couple other schools that'll ask for it. They'll ask for like hours per week. And then some places have started asking for you to indicate part-time versus full-time, paid versus unpaid, which I hate. Unless the school asks for it, I would not provide that information.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to be mindful because we have so many questions. I'm so sorry we will not be able to answer all of them tonight. We will try our absolute best to get through as many as possible. Okay, this is a really great question. It's in regards to letters of recommendation. So this person says, you can write the letter for them if they don't know you well, correct?
No. If they don't know you, you can't write a letter for them that details things that they don't know about you, because then that would be like lying essentially. You need to go to when we say giving them like a blueprint, this is as a way to refresh their recollection of who you are. These are the information you would be putting in a draft letter for them to flesh out would be stuff that they already know about you. We're not telling you to make things up about yourself that they would not know. Like, you don't do that for someone that you don't know. or don't ask for a recommendation from someone that you don't know.
I have nothing else to add. I will say I have seen a number of professors who, like, I don't know if it's lazy. I don't know what it is, but they'll be like, write the letter and I'll sign my name. I do not recommend this. You could have an admissions officer call that person and start asking questions, because that, like, at the end, you're always supposed to say, like, please contact me with any questions. Like, you could get up a creek without a paddle very quickly in that situation. My answer is, like, if you have a recommender asking that, you do not want that recommender. If they want a few paragraphs for you to explain why you want to go to law school, if they want a couple of paragraphs where you tell them, like, what to focus their letter on, great. And then if they borrow a couple sentences you wrote, okay, that's fine. But writing a letter for a recommender is not something I am personally comfortable with. And I don't think that it does you a great service in your application.
Especially if that recommender doesn't know you and you're writing details that they wouldn't know about you. That would be like the worst. And I think, like I said before, a blueprint, bullet points, or a general template that they can use to kind of fill more information in, and making sure that it's clear that you say, this is just some information that I think would be useful to explain who I am and what I've accomplished in your class, and to respect your time and energy. I've drafted some information that might help refresh your recollection of who I am, but it's by no means something that they should just sign off on and submit like as is. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Awesome. We're right on the hour, so unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to get to all the wonderful questions, but I see a ton of questions in here regarding like letters of recommendation, regarding resumes. What I can do is everyone will receive this recording, and what we will do is within the recording, we'll send you some links to articles, past webinars, videos you can watch to hopefully answer all your questions, since we won't be able to do that tonight. Tamar, Jesse, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Our audience at home, and those watching live, thank you, or I should say watching the recording, thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to continue putting these on. We look forward to seeing you next week. And I know this came up in the chat a couple of times, but the next webinar that we have is Wednesday, December 11th at 9 p.m. EST. It's all about how to get into law school as a non-traditional applicant. So if you are a non-traditional applicant and you want to join, it's not on our website yet, please send me an email. I'll send you early access. You can get registered and join us next week. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.